I'm Sean Sovine. I'm a PhD student at Virginia Tech. I'll be graduating in May of 2022. My advisor is Eyvindur Palsson, and I'll be applying for postdoc positions in fall of 2022. So this will be a presentation on some of the research that I did for my dissertation. This work was focused on LP bounds for the triangle averaging operator. And so for background, here's a look at the spherical averaging operator. This is a very well-studied object in harmonic analysis. So here we're taking the average of a function over the sphere centered at x with radius t with respect to the normalized spherical surface measure. And I've listed here a few of the classic results on the LP bounds for this operator, as well as some of the more recent properties that have been studied for this object. We are interested in multilinear versions of this operator. So one such operator is the bilinear spherical average. So here we're averaging the product of two functions over a sphere of radius or dimension 2d minus 1 and radius t. And so this operator and its maximal variant have been studied by several authors in recent years. We are mostly interested in the triangle average. Here we have the average of a product of two functions over the manifold in R2D of equilateral triangles, as described here, with respect to the natural surface measure. And so this operator appeared in work by Greenleaf and losevich in 2012 on the existence of triangles in sets with large enough Hausdorff dimension. It's also appeared in this and higher dimensional generalizations so for example, the simplex averaging operators have appeared in problems on existence of point configurations in sets of positive upper density as well. So to put the problem in a more general framework, we can consider the bilinear convolution of two functions with a compactly supported finite Borel measure and maximal variance thereof. So for these operators, thanks to Minkowski's integral inequality, LP bounds with Hilbert exponents where the output is in LR with R greater than or equal to 1, so Banach LP space, those follow more or less immediately. So more interesting questions are the case where R is less than 1, so the output's in a quasi-Banach LP space, or for LP improving inequalities where the output R is greater than the Hilbert exponent, and also bounds for maximal variance of these operators. And so, of course, via the Fourier transform, we have this bilinear multiplier representation, which is often convenient to use. So in our first work, my advisor and I followed this approach used by Barrio Nuevo and collaborators for the bilinear spherical, they studied the bilinear maximal spherical averages. And, but we just wanted to get some quasi-Banach bounds for the triangle averaging operator. And so this approach builds on work by Rubio de Francia from 1986. And so the idea is you decompose your multiplier into dyadic annuli. And in our case, we then took each of those dyadic pieces and we used a finer decomposition of those along with a lemma that I'll display in the next slide of Grafakos, Hay, and Slavakova. And that resulted in L2 plus L2 to L1 bounds for the dyadic pieces with rapidly decaying operator norms. And then you can also get, by simpler techniques, a wider range of LP bounds for those dyadic pieces with norms that grow in J. And so you can interpolate between the good and the good norm pieces and good norm points and the bad norm points as far as possible to retain the summability of the pieces and then sum those up to get a bound for the operator. So following this approach, we were able to get some quasi-Banach LP bounds for the triangle average in higher dimensions. And so here's the lemma that I just mentioned of Grafakos, Hay, and Slavakova. So there's no Plancherel's theorem in the bilinear setting, but there is this, this is a particular application of their lemma in the case of the bilinear convolution. And so it lets you bound the operator norm from L2 cross L2 into L1 in terms of L infinity norms on finite limiting derivatives plus an LQ norm for some Q between 1 and 4. And so in our case, we obtained this explicit representation for the multiplier for the triangle measure. And then from this, we were able to get this Fourier decay estimate for the Fourier transform of the spherical measure. And so, so that was our first approach to this operator. In recent work, Cook, Lyle, and Magyar have established some maximal bounds for the K-simplex averaging operators, which are displayed here. So this is like a higher dimensional analog of the spherical averages. Here we're averaging a product of K functions over all rotations of a given K-simplex. And so these authors used the Gelfand-Leray measure and were able to get maximal bounds for this operator that are approaching the optimal range as the dimension increases. And so, of course, these imply, special case would be the triangle averaging operator where K is 2. In recent work with losevich and Palsson and myself, we proved some quasi-Banach bounds for the triangle averaging operator that hold in lower dimensions, that they fall outside the range implied by Cook, Lyle, and Magyar's results in lower dimensions. And we also proved some LP improving bounds for the triangle, bilinear, spherical, and simplex averages. So here's some ideas from our approach in that work. So in 2001, Grafakos and Colvin used this cube decomposition technique that allows you to take LP improving bounds from multilinear operator into L1 and transform those into quasi-Banach bounds, as long as your operator satisfies a couple localization properties. And so in particular, this applies to convolutions with compactly supported finite measures. And so for our bilinear convolution operator, given positive functions f and g, then you can rewrite the L1 norm of that operator in terms of this dual pairing. And here T mu minus is a linear convolution operator with this push forward measure. So mu minus is the push forward of your measure mu by the subtraction operator, the two variables. And so combining this observation with this Grafakos and Colvin technique, if this push forward measure is LP improving, that will give you some quasi-Banach bounds for your bilinear convolution. And if your push forward measure is absolutely continuous with a nice density, then that also will give you some very nice quasi-Banach bounds for your bilinear convolution operator. And so in the particular case of the bilinear spherical average, we showed that this push forward measure is absolutely continuous with a density in L infinity. And then that implies this L1 cross 1 into L1 bound for the bilinear spherical average. And then via this Grafakos and Colvin technique, that gives you the full range of quasi-Banach bounds for that operator of LP bounds with Hilder exponents all the way down to output in L1 half. And then for the triangle averaging operator, this push forward measure is actually the spherical measure. And so there we can use the well-known LP improving bounds for that measure to obtain this range of LP bounds for the triangle operator. And these hold for dimensions d greater than or equal to 2. And in the same work, we also generalized a technique that was used by Greenleaf, Losevich, Krauss, and Liu in 2001. And that allowed us to obtain this LP improving restricted strong type bound. So the argument is based on transversality. So we can rewrite this K norm on the left side here. And then using the compactness of a manifold, we can split the norm into pieces, or we can split the operator into pieces, and then we can bound each piece by this integral over a product of spheres. And then if we go into local coordinates on each of those spheres, we can choose enough independent directions so that locally we have a diffeomorphism of open sets in RDK minus 1, so we can just make a change of variables, and we have an integral against a smooth bounded function then. And so when we do that, that gives us this bound. Okay, and then in our most recent work, we've looked at sparse bounds for the triangle averaging operator. So for a multilinear operator U of K functions, sparse bounds have the form that's shown here. And so on the right side, the angle brackets are the LP average of your function over the cube Q. And the supremum is taken over all sparse collections. A collection is called sparse if it satisfies the condition given here. So basically, we're saying that a collection of cubes is sparse if it's sort of quantitatively almost disjoint. And it's known that sparse bounds imply a range of multilinear weighted bounds, and also, and for such bounds, there are some powerful extrapolation techniques. And so I've given some references for some of those. For some background on the sparse bounds, in 2019, Michael Lacey proved sparse bounds for maximal spherical averages. His approach started by proving LP continuity estimates for spherical averages and single scale maximal variance. And then he used a variant of an argument of Condé, Kulik, Diplinio, and Hu from 2017. This involves a recursive Calderon-Zygmunt decomposition. It uses the localization operator and LP improving continuity estimates to obtain these sparse bounds. And so Rankal, Shrivastava, and Schuin have very recently extended this result of Lacey to the bilinear setting with these product type maximal spherical averages. And so we showed that that argument can be adapted to the triangle operators. And so basically the result is it allows you to upgrade LP improving bounds for the triangle operator to sparse bounds for the Lacunary maximal version, and to upgrade LP improving bounds for the single scale maximal version of that operator to the full maximal operator. And so this argument, in the triangle case, we used these simultaneous LP continuity estimates for the triangle averaging operator, and there's a similar estimate for the single scale maximal version. Okay, so that sums up the research that I wanted to present on. As I mentioned, I'm applying for postdoc positions for fall of 2022. In terms of future research, I'm interested in many or most of the problems that are being currently studied in harmonic analysis. In particular, though, I'm interested in dyadic analysis and weighted and sparse bounds. Also, recent developments in singular integral theory and point configuration problems. Thank you for watching my talk.